Hi guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Denise. It is Sunday and I am reading Chapter 7, Attitude of Neville Goddard's The Power of Awareness. Experiments recently conducted in the Ladder Psychology Laboratory at Hanover, New Hampshire prove that what you see when you look at something depends not so much on what is there as on the assumption you make when you look. Since what we believe to be the real physical world is actually only an assumptive world, it is not surprising that these experiments prove that what appears to be solid reality is actually the result of expectations or assumptions. Your assumptions determine not only what you see, but also what you do, for they govern all of your conscious and subconscious movements towards the fulfillment of themselves. Over a century ago, this truth was stated by Emerson as follows: As the world was plastic and fluid in the hands of God, so it is ever to so much of his attributes as we bring to it. To ignorance and sin it is flint. They adapt themselves to it as they may, but in proportion as a man has anything in him divine, the firmament flows before him and takes his signet and form. So this is why I try to stress in videos and in sessions to not focus so much or worry so much about what action to take, what to do, what to say, how to behave, and instead put all of that effort and attention on how do I want to think, how do I want to feel, mostly how do I want to feel, and then how does that version of me think, or how will I think when I feel that way? What are the thoughts that are reflected by those feelings, and practicing that instead of thinking about what to do out here, because everything you do is driven by your state of consciousness, your thoughts, assumptions, and beliefs, your self-concept. All action is driven automatically from that. So put your effort and attention more on the thoughts you're thinking internally, the feelings you're holding inside. What are you identifying with, and what story are you telling yourself? And that's what you want to put your effort into shifting. And then as a result, the reflection will change. Your assumption is the hand of God molding the firmament into the image of that which you assume. The assumption of the wish fulfilled is the high tide which lifts you easily off the bar of the senses where you have so long lain stranded. It lifts the mind into prophecy in the full right sense of the word. And if you have that controlled imagination and absorbed attention which it is possible to attain, you may be sure that all your assumption implies will come to pass. When William Blake wrote, "What seems to be is to those to whom it seems to be," he was only repeating the eternal truth. There is nothing unclean of itself, but to him that esteemeth anything to be unclean, to him it is unclean. It's all perspective. It's all assumption. Nothing is clean or unclean. It all just is. And as we can practice the assumption that it is all just God, it is all just perfect, that is what it will be. But when we have these ideas or assumptions that something is bad and something is, whatever, bad for us, bad to be around us, a person is bad, that's what we will perceive. That's what we will manifest. That's what will be reflected back to us. Because there is nothing unclean of itself or clean of itself, you should assume the best and think only of that which is lovely and of good rapport. It is not superior insight, but ignorance of this law of assumption, if you read into the greatness of men some littleness with which you may be familiar, or into some situation or circumstance an unfavorable conviction. Your particular relationship to another influences your assumption with respect to that other and makes you see in him that which you do see. So there is nobody out there that is a certain way, that nobody is however it is you maybe have been or are currently defining them as. It is in the definition that the manifestation is showing up. Your 3D is reflecting back to you the definitions you've been assigning to your 3D. It's quite interesting. If you can change your opinion of another, then what you now believe of him cannot be absolutely true, but it is only relatively true. The following is an actual case history illustrating how the law of assumption works. One day, a costume designer described to me her difficulties in working with a prominent theatrical producer. She was convinced that he unjustly criticized and rejected her best work, and that often he was deliberately rude and unfair to her. Upon hearing her story, I explained that if she found the other rude and unfair, it was a sure sign that she herself was wanting, and that it was not the producer, but herself that was in need of a new attitude. I told her that the power of this law of assumption and its practical application could be discovered only through experience, and that only by assuming that the situation was already what she wanted it to be could she prove that she could bring about the change desired. Her employer was merely bearing witness, telling her by his behavior what her concept of him was. I suggested that it was quite probable that she was carrying on conversations with him in her mind, which were filled with criticism and recriminations. There was no doubt but that she was mentally arguing with the producer, for others only echo that which we whisper to them in secret. I asked her if it was not true that she talked to him mentally, and if so, what those conversations were like. She confessed that every morning on her way to the theater, she told him just what she thought of him in a way that she would never have dared address him in person. The intensity and force of her mental arguments with him automatically established his behavior towards her. She began to realize that all of us carry on mental conversations, but unfortunately, on most occasions, these conversations are argumentative, that we have only to observe the passerby on the street to prove this assertion, that so many people are mentally engrossed in conversations and few appear to be happy about it. But the very intensity of their feeling must lead them quickly to the unpleasant incident they themselves have mentally created and therefore must now encounter. When she realized what she had been doing, she agreed to change her attitude and to live this law faithfully by assuming that her job was highly satisfactory and her relationship with the producer was a very happy one. To do this, she agreed that before going to sleep at night, on her way to work, and at other intervals during the day, she would imagine that he had congratulated her on her fine designs and that she, in turn, had thanked him for his praise and kindness. To her great delight, she soon discovered for herself that her own attitude was the cause of all that befell her. The behavior of her employer miraculously reversed itself. His attitude, echoing as it had always done that which she had assumed, now reflected her changed concept of him. It wasn't him that changed. It wasn't she that tried to change him. It was that she changed her concept internally. She left the 3D alone and she focused internally on the types of thoughts, feelings, conversations, and imagery that she would be experiencing had her reality been showing up exactly how she preferred it to. If she had been experiencing what she really desired was like a harmonious relationship with this person. And in her doing that internally while leaving everything else be, he reflected back those changes. What she did was by the power of her imagination. Her persistent assumption influenced his behavior and determined his attitude toward her. Now that's where I disagree with Neville. I don't think that this is a lesson or an example of influencing. I believe that it's all reflecting, but to each their own. I believe that his behavior and everyone's behavior outside of us is the reflection of what we've been doing internally. Not so much that us shifting internally is influencing them, but it's just like when you put clothes on in the mirror, they will naturally reflect back what you're wearing. When you put your makeup on, it will reflect back the makeup. When you do anything and look in the mirror, that reflection is going to show you precisely what the body has done. And so same thing with our reality. When we change the internal assumptions and stories and beliefs, it's just going to reflect back the truth of what we are now telling instead of we're changing it out there or influencing it. But whatever. With the passport of desire on the wings of a controlled imagination, she traveled into the future of her own predetermined experience. Thus, we see it as not facts, but that which we create in our imagination, which shapes our lives, for the most of the conflicts of the day are due to the want of a little imagination to cast the beam out of our own eye. It is the exact and literal-minded who live in a fictitious world. As this designer, by her controlled imagination, started the subtle change in her employer's mind, so can we, by the control of our own imagination and wisely directed feeling, solve our problems. By the intensity of her imagination and feeling, the designer cast a kind of enchantment on her producer's mind and caused him to think that his generous praise originated with him. Often, our most elaborate and original thoughts are determined by another. We should never be certain that it was not some woman treading in the winepress who began that subtle change in men's mind, or that the passion did not begin in the mind of some shepherd boy, lighting up his eyes for a moment before it ran upon its way. William Butler Yeats. All right, there we go. Next week, we will do chapter 8. You all have a wonderful rest of your Sunday and a great week ahead, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.